A very good afternoon, a very good morning, a very good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. We would like to welcome for an hour with Treasury. We broadcasting from Bulawayo in terms of myself, but I have special guests from different parts of the globe who will be joining me shortly. What we try to do is to provide updates, provide insights, provide a platform where we can share on various issues that relate to the Treasury function and beyond, issues that can assist us in the work that we do and the different ministries that compose the Seventh-day Adventist Church. We are, coming through during a month which is, 2021 has started on not so great note. Some of us are recovering from COVID. Some of us are currently under treatment. Some of us have lost loved ones. But we think it's also a great time to be a Christian. The hope that we have is basically what is getting us through a lot of the stuff that we're going through. Before I actually introduce you to some of our guests, we want to take a moment to recognize something that is a little unfortunate that took place this month. One of our Treasury team members, Mrs. Marilyn Franch, lost her loved one. Dr. Eugene Leon Franch passed away on the 18th of January. But again, like I mentioned, Mrs. Franch is actually a member of our Zouk Treasury team. She serves in the South Zimbabwe Conference of our union. And Dr. Franch has been one of these colorful characters, figures, ministers who have really brought some great work to life in our territory and beyond. So we just want to take a few minutes to appreciate, recognize him, honor him, and the work that he has done in this part of the world. So what some people may not actually know is that I attended Dr. Franch's wedding as a 6-year-old in 1981. I've just given away my age, but yeah, it was one of the first weddings where we actually had favors, the little sweets and things that you get at a wedding. So it was very memorable for me as a child, and it was my honor to then serve with him at the old Zimbabwe Union Conference, where he was the Associate Secretary, and when I was the CFO there and before that. So we want to appreciate the work that has been done, and also ask that we keep the family in your prayers, because this is a tough time. And also remember that the great work that he has started, that he has done, the race that he has run, it's our responsibility to carry it on and to make sure that we meet with him in that earth made new on that great day. One of our guests actually worked, in fact, a number of our guests on today's show actually worked with Dr. Franch. So it will be a homecoming for them too. So with that, allow me to move on. And maybe let me just quickly note that, okay, thank you so much. That's Anton Franch, Dr. Franch's son. Thanks to you, strength to you, Anton, and the family, and your wife, Tara, and your mom and everybody. We thank you for the courage that you have shown to date. Thank you so much. Now, without any further ado, allow me to introduce some of our guests. In fact, all of our guests this afternoon. Let me just pop them onto the screen and then do a brief introduction. Let me go clockwise. Yeah, it is clockwise, according to the way it appears on the screen. I hope that's how people see it. Dr. Laguno is next to me on the screen. Dr. Alex Laguno, he and his wife have served the continent for a long, long time. And I really want to appreciate the work they've done. We want to recognize you, Doc, for everything you've done from your SID days and now at the GC and the philanthropic work that you also do. I know I don't want to expose you, but people need to know that you put your money where your mouth is. The Lagunos do a lot of great work behind the scenes to empower some of the less privileged in our midst in the continent. So we just want to appreciate you. You will tell us a bit more about your current office, what you do in a second. We also have Sister Ruthie Nyawasha. She is the risk coordinator at the SID, which is the Southern Africa Indian Ocean Division. Sister Ruthie, we appreciate the manner in which you've been consistent in that department. Ever since I joined working for the church, you've been a leading light in areas pertaining to risk management. And it's only appropriate that you are with us today as we try to unpack some of these issues today. So welcome, and thank you for joining us today. And our last guest, last but not least, had to wake up earlier than all of us. She's in the DMV area, around about, is it Maryland or Washington, D.C., in the Maryland area? Mm-hmm. And it's very early in the morning for you, well, earlier than it is for us, and we appreciate you being here with us. She is an associate general counsel at the GC headquarters. You'll tell us a bit more what that entails. She'll be uncomfortable about what I'm going to say next, but she's a Harvard graduate. She studied law at Harvard. Now, I say this for a specific reason, because many times we don't actually appreciate the depth we have in our ranks in the church. So just look around, do your research, see what the percentage, what it takes to get into Harvard Law School, and you'll appreciate that this is an achievement. And to have this level of expertise in our ranks working for the church, we want to praise God for that. And I won't mention the element about the MPH from Johns Hopkins, but that's something else. I told you I'd make you uncomfortable. Okay, so with that, let's get started. And I think I want to start with Elder Dr. Laguno. Can you just let us know what your office is at the moment, the kind of work that you're doing? I know you're a director at the Adventist AIDS International Ministries at the GC, but people may not really appreciate what that means. Can you just unpack that for us a little bit and let us know the work that's done?
Good day, everybody, and also good evening, wherever our listeners are from. And thank you so much, Elder Inda, for the opportunity that you have granted me to be able to participate in this very valuable program of yours. I know a lot of people have greatly benefited from this presentation. For the past 5 years, I am the executive director of the Adventist AIDS International Ministry, which is under the General Conference, but it is stationed here in South Africa. Well, primarily the office is to attend to the great needs of HIV/AIDS, especially here in Africa, wherein we really have this pandemic circulating. More than about 69% of the cases are actually here in the African continent. That's the reason why the General Conference had decided to have the office here. But also being under the health ministries, then aside from the AIDS program that I do, I also do what we call health promotions and other aspects of health, which is very important, because also really AIDS by itself is a health issue, but it is also related with other health issues.
Sorry, I was on mute there for a minute. Sorry about that. I think that helps to give the picture, and maybe just a quick add-on to that question. Would you say then your office is also well placed to address matters around the coronavirus, the COVID-19 pandemic, in light of your expertise?
Yeah, part of it too is because you see, when you have HIV/AIDS, your risk of getting COVID is actually much higher. They estimate that people with HIV have about 2.3% or times the ordinary individual. But of course, also because you see, it is really very important that we also stress about this COVID as a health problem, because it is really engulfing the whole world. And also in our office too, we are also addressing that issue. And it's unfortunate because, part also of our ministry is to help people who are affected, trying to give them what we call income generating projects, especially orphans. And as you know, these vulnerable people have been seriously impacted by this COVID. People are losing jobs, not only that, but also their health has been compromised. So we are so glad that we are in this office to be able to address also issues related to COVID.
Thank you so much, and just to appreciate you again for the work you've done to date, and we feel confident to have you in our ranks as we face what is really a great challenge as far as this pandemic is concerned. Maybe let me just quickly hop over to Sister Jennifer, just to ask you to unpack what your office is. What takes place in the office of General Counsel at the GC, and maybe just to give us an idea what a day in the life looks like.
Sure. So at the Office of General Counsel, we have 5 attorneys and 4 support staff currently. Our General Counsel is Karnik Dukmetsian. I'm sure many have met him or are familiar with him. He handles our general litigation for the church governance and corporate issues, and just most of our legal matters. He also deals with, let's say, working policy and things of that nature. Our second attorney is Tom Wetmore, and he handles tax issues for the church and also HR and employment issues. We also have Todd McFarland. He is our religious accommodations, First Amendment, and general litigation attorney. And our newest attorney was Josh Pierre. He handles our contract issues. And I handle intellectual property matters and privacy. So that encompasses trademarks, copyrights, and also keeping the church compliant with the various privacy laws and regulations that have come into play. I think the biggest one that people are aware of is the GDPR out of the European Union, the General Data Privacy Regulation. So my day varies, of course, but typically I'm dealing with making sure that our trademarks are being protected. I'm making sure that third parties aren't using our name or our Flame logo or some of our other trademarks without permission, or using them for ministries that aren't related to the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I also make sure that when our church is using materials, creative materials that are under copyright, that we're doing so legally, so that we have documented permissions in place and license agreements in place so that our church isn't infringing on other people's intellectual property. And then that third prong of what I do is making sure that we are respecting personal data and personal privacy. So making sure that we have secure, that we are handling that data in a secure fashion, that we are updating it as necessary, and that we're getting the necessary consents and permissions before we store or use anyone's personal data from the church.
Okay, I'm convinced you have a full day. Looking at the amount of data that we churn out, I mean, with each year, the amount of data that is moving through our organizations is astonishing. So I'm assuming that with each year, your workload is increasing, and as the church also seems to be more prominent online, I'm assuming that the nature of your work has changed. But we'll jump into that a little later on. I just wanted to then jump over to Sister Ruthie, just to get a sense of what her sort of, where she's coming from, and then we'll start putting our pictures together. Sister Ruthie, you're a risk coordinator. Just tell us a bit more what that means, and also in the context of appreciating that risk is at all levels of the church. Can you tell us if we should also expect to see risk coordinators at the local church level?
Greetings to everyone across the globe. I work under Adventist Risk Management, which is an official insurance and risk management company for Seventh-day Adventists worldwide under the General Conference. And in the office, I work together with my boss, Mr. Goodson Shumba, the two of us for the territory of SID. And we work with offices. Our offices, head offices for Africa is in UK, but generally it's under the General Conference in Washington. So my work is to provide timely real-world insurance products and innovative risk management solutions for minimizing risk within Adventist ministries at all levels. So we recommend best practices to eliminate oversights that can lead to costly accidents within all our institutions. We don't view what we do as just a business, but our ministry is to protect the ministry of the church. So we serve members, we serve churches, schools, hospitals, and camps. We've got different policies that maybe I'll get into that we use to minimize risk and cover, of which we also concentrate. Of late, we were not doing that much in our territory, but within the last 3 years, we started concentrating much on the risk control measures in order to minimize the risks. For property, emergency planning, child protection, travel, health, liabilities, finance. And the other thing that I also do is to move around the unions, training the risk coordinators that are supposed to be there in each union and in all our institutions. So that's basically what I do as far as the risk aspect is concerned.
Okay, great. I think that helps to give us a good idea of, we'll unpack it a little more as we go. I think maybe we can see the thread, between, say, our legal people and what you're dealing with, Sister Ruthie, and of course, in a COVID-19 pandemic environment, some of these risks are actually linked to to health. So we'll try to tie it all together and make it make sense this afternoon. Now, Doc, maybe let me jump over to you. We're currently experiencing effectively a second wave for us of the COVID-19 pandemic. As I broadcast, we were in our lockdown. A severe lockdown was actually extended for another 15 days, up to the 15th of Feb. We've seen, we've lost a lot of members. We've lost, loved ones, and it's coming across as though sometimes we feel like we're not adequately prepared. Can you just maybe tell us what is the best approach for our churches to meet or to contain what is really a deadly risk?
My condolences and sympathies for families and workers and friends who have really lost loved ones. It's so painful experience, and we just experienced the passing away of Pastor Franz, and condolence to the family and so many others who are out there. Really, this pandemic is really devastating the whole world, and the church is not exempted. And we have to realize that some of the church functions can also actually promote the infection or contagious disease of COVID. In fact, in Korea, when it was first around in Korea, because from Wuhan, the second epicenter was actually in South Korea, it was because of a religious activity. And so we have to be very careful as a church, and even choir practices, for instance. And this is it. I don't know what litigations can actually come out because of being what we call the center of, or what we call a place wherein you have actually contracted the virus. And right now, I don't hear of any instances wherein the church has been sued, but it's very possible that later on that can actually happen, or in people who contracted, like for instance, in a choir practice or what we call a church meeting, have contracted the virus, and the church is responsible for that. I don't know whether Ruth Nyawasha later on is going to expound on that, but really what is very important, number one, is that we follow the guidelines of the government. When the government says you should not meet, okay, then let's not meet. If it says that it's only allowed 20 of the people are going to be meeting in such a particular place, then we should follow that, you see. And of course, it is very important also to realize, for instance, one of the things that I noticed in the church, I'm going to mention some of these procedures in individual members. Very important that we have what we call proper aeration, because the virus is actually suspended in the environment, in the air. And if we don't have what we call a good aeration, the virus can be spread faster if there is no proper ventilation, you see. And I also would like to tell the church, this is also an opportunity, because really we have to realize that we might be able to address the issue of preventing the virus, but we have to also realize, you see, that we need to immediately tell people about the good news of salvation. There are so many people who are dying out there who have not heard about the gospel, about the plan of salvation to God. And I challenge our churches really also to be very intentional. We are saying that, well, social distancing, but we can actually help with, even social media, you see. And of course, for individual church members, it is very important that we also follow what we call the regulations of the government. I don't have much time here, but what I would like to emphasize is, for instance, the wearing of mask, okay? Because when you wear the mask, it is going to help prevent you from spreading. At the same time, it is also going to protect you. Now, for instance, it is true that some people are going to get the virus because of the mask, but it is not going to be as much when you have a protection, because you see, your infection will depend on what we call the inoculum. The inoculum is the initial virus that enters into your body when you get exposed. If you don't have a mask, you're going to have more of the inoculum. And the more of the virus that you have, that means it is going to be more grave or more serious. So let us wear this mask. Number two, we have these programs in the church about celebrations, New Start. Let us take that into consideration, because that is really going to help us in the prevention of the disease. And our churches should have the facilities, like for instance, sanitation facilities, distancing facilities, not only that, but washing of the hands facilities. And I urge our members, for instance, that if you have a comorbidity, because that is the problem, people actually die. It's okay if you get the virus as long as we don't die, although it is going to be painful and expensive. But what we would like to prevent is really death. And about 85 to 90% of those who die with COVID have what we call comorbidities. When we say comorbidities, it means, for instance, high blood pressure, heart disease, kidney disease, lung diseases, and so forth. So if you have what we call a comorbidity, it is very important that you should have this controlled. If you have high blood pressure, you should control that blood pressure. If you have what we call diabetes, you should control that blood the diabetes, because then even if you get that COVID, then your chances of survival are much better if you are controlling what we call the comorbidities.
Doc, that's very helpful.
And of course, let me just focus. Okay, and what is important is that if the vaccine is available, then we should strive. We should actually try to see to that we get vaccinated.
Okay, I think you've just gone to an area that okay, I'll come back to you, Doc. Let me hop. I noticed you wanted to adjust. Let me hop over to Jennifer while you. Yeah. So what I wanted to say, Sister Jennifer, is we've got a lot of churches closed during these lockdowns. We've moved a lot of our activities online, and this is a testament to a lot of our activities moving online. And yet, I think, like you briefly mentioned, it comes with risks, be it to the individuals, to the church, and so on. Do you want to unpack what you think the key emerging legal risks are from this shift to an online environment?
Sure. So for me, the biggest risk of conducting church online, and I do encourage churches to continue to have church online. We should not be meeting in person, especially if we have restrictions on the size of meetings. But the biggest risk that I see, and this is a risk even pre-COVID, is that we stream music on our church during our church services without having the necessary permissions. And this is a huge risk for our church because we don't have the right to stream music that is copyright protected without permission. So what I tell churches is that if you're going to stream the musical portion of your services, make sure that it's either original music that you have created or music that is in public domain. I will say that in the US, at least, and in some other countries, there are some organizations that provide licenses for streaming of musical performances. Two that we use in the US are CCS, it's Christian Copyright Solutions, and CCLI. I looked online, I did not see that CCLI had a license in Zimbabwe. That may be changing soon, but there may be another organization that is like CCLI that will allow you to stream. And I would just advise, if you're going to be streaming musical works during service, make sure you have a license in place. Otherwise, you're subjecting your local church and also your conference and the union up to the division to a lawsuit. And it can be extremely, extremely costly. In addition to music, of course, if you're going to be sharing YouTube videos or photos that you don't own, that is also subjecting you to liability. But music is the big one because we love singing in our churches. So I would just be very cautious with that.
Okay. And maybe, do you want to speak to, the idea of, on these platforms, I notice it's becoming a lot relatively unregulated. Anyone can pick up a mic and just speak and say they're speaking under the auspices of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Is that a risk that you think is also emerging, where maybe people are speaking outside of what we believe as Seventh-day Adventists?
That also is a risk. I mean, how we tend to control that or monitor that at the GC, at least, is that we monitor the use of our trademark. So if someone is saying, I am a Seventh-day Adventist pastor from such and such Seventh-day Adventist church, and that church is not actually a member of one of the local conferences, then those complaints should come to me if you hear about that. So that way I can send out the cease and desist, because we do very vigorously monitor the use of the name Adventist, Seventh-day Adventist, and our flame logo. And we are working towards registering our name and logo in every country that it's possible for us to register those trademarks. But this is where I rely on the membership to inform me of when people are misrepresenting that they are officials speaking on behalf of the church. If you are aware of that, please let me know, and I will then, contact the individual organization that is doing that.
Maybe as you speak about trademarks, maybe just to zone in on that, who can actually use our trademarks? I mean, I've seen during the pandemic, I've seen face masks with the flame logo, and in some cases being sold. I've also seen T-shirts, which we know nothing of here at the union. Who's allowed to use the logo?
Sure. So again, the trademarks are registered in the name of the General Conference Corporation, and under our working policy, denominational entities such as our unions, our conferences, our health institutions, they can use the name and logo without getting any additional permission from the GC. Also, our churches can use our logo for ministry. However, this is restricted. You cannot charge for this. It can't be for profit. So when you're selling these things, let's say that it's not related to a ministry that you're fundraising for, but you're just selling them, that's not allowed. For individuals or independent ministries, if you want to use our logo or the name, then that has to be a request that's made to the General Conference through my office, and you'll get a license once they've decided whether or not to grant that license. I will put my email address, if that's fine, into the comment section if people want to reach out to me for additional questions with that. But really, individuals should not be using the logo either on T-shirts or hats or for any other purpose without getting permission from the GC first.
Wow, that's a big statement right there, and I'm not sure how one underlines a comment. that's a big comment that needs to be underlined. As I see a lot of misuse of the logo in our part of the world, certainly. And maybe just to quickly jump over to Sister Ruthie before I come back to the doctor to follow up on something he said. I did mention earlier on that you're our link to Adventist risk management, and you explained what that is. I just want to maybe let people know that there's a website for Adventist risk management, and I would encourage everyone who is associated with the church to be familiar with that website. I think it's adventistrisk.org. Sister Ruthie will correct me. I think that's what it is, but feel free. I just wanted to highlight that. So, Sister Ruthie, you are our liaison with Adventist risk management. What's the position of the church? Well, not of the church, of Adventist risk management with respect to COVID-19 claims, because a lot of our churches do have policies with ARM. But what has anything changed in terms of those policies in the context of COVID?
I can say yes and no, but I just want to comment on what Jennifer has also said as far as live streaming is concerned before I get into your answer, to answer you. On live streaming, if we can notice, the governments have put up they've limited the number of people that can congregate at any number of time. So some congregations, they are huge, and the government has put up to say 50 maximum people. And then there's live streaming that is going on, and other people are worshiping from their homes. We should also take note that as ARM, there's also a risk of live streaming people that are not comfortable, and that can end up having legal implications. So in each church, they must have a no streaming zone, and each members should be told that this zone, as long as you sit on the left side of the pew, you have consented to be streamed, to have live streaming. I just wanted to comment on that as well. And to go on to your question of claims that have been coming up or that are linked to COVID, what I can say is we all know the GC session was around the corner. Some people had bought their tickets and they had to cancel their tickets. And what I wanted to say is if someone had already booked and needed to cancel because of COVID, Adventist Risk Management is not paying back, or you can't put a claim, because we don't have a policy for no cancellation of a trip because of the pandemic, or because it has been triggered by the threat of an infection. That's one. And we also have our pastors and some calls that people are traveling on church business, because there's a point whereby people started traveling, and then there was a change of lockdown levels as well, and other people had traveled and they were stuck in one country. So if you're already traveling overseas in a country with an outbreak of COVID, and is ARM going to pay back for your trip? There is no cover for that as well for ARM. But Dr. Laguno mentioned earlier on about the issue of, I can put it in a question like, what is the potential liability to a church or to an organization if a government authority mandates shutting down operations to minimize the spread of the virus, and a school, a university, or a church even does not cancel classes, or they continue to operate and open the church? As far as the position of ARM is concerned, it is mandated for any church or any organization to comply. Mm-hmm. And all fines and penalties arising from not following the mandate would not be insurable, and would be a responsibility of that organization. So we must always follow the laws of the land. So wow. I think it has been mostly about traveling and people wanting to insist operating, yet the government has shut down, but people continue wanting to behave their old ways. ARM will not honor up those claims.
Okay, I think it's clear.
And the last thing is, if you have to get sick with COVID, even if you were traveling, ARM will take up and will pay up for all the medical expenses, because our policy does not exclude COVID or whatever medical expenses that anyone would incur. ARM will own up that claim.
Okay, I think it's clear. What I'm getting is ARM will not let people off the hook for failure to comply with what has become very clear in terms of government regulations or announcements and things like that. But I think in the event of one actually being ill and has a policy that addresses, an illness, I think what I'm getting is ARM will honor that. And I think we'll talk a bit more about that with respect to some of the policies that I think you will assist us to highlight in the context of churches. Doc Laguno, I just wanted to, thanks for that, by the way, Sister Ruthie. Doc, I wanted to take you up on the issue of the vaccination. You gave us a lot of valuable insights. And I think one thing that needs to be clear, you made it very clear that as a church, our position is to support the efforts of the various governments that where we are, located in their efforts to combat the pandemic. You did then mention something to the effect of a vaccination. I don't know what it's like in where you are, but we've seen a lot of discussion around conspiracy theories around the vaccination. We've also been told that in some instances people have they've fallen ill because of the vaccine and so on. So can you maybe tell us how you think a vaccine is going to assist in the fight against the pandemic, and maybe address some of the this stuff that we're hearing on the street?
Okay, the principle here for immunity is to actually help your body to create a defense so that when the actual virus is going to come into your body, then your body is able to fight. Let me just draw an example, for instance. If in your community, it has been rumored that there is what we call a killer around in your community. So now, what do you do to protect yourself? If it is an individual, for instance, an individual who is going to be there and doing a serial killer. Well, first of all, what we need to do is to identify, okay? And that is very good because the virus we have already identified. So what the police will do is that they are going to send a picture. Okay, this is the picture of the man who is actually a serial killer. Well, and after you actually circulate, so people are going to be aware. And that is one stage actually of the development of the virus. They first have to develop, actually, to find out what is the virus, identify the virus. Now that they have identified the virus, now they're going to say, what are we going to do with that virus? So what they do is that they have developed an immunization program, a vaccine wherein the body is going to recognize this virus, this COVID, and then create a defense. Now, back again to the example of what we call a killer around. So what are you going to do? Now that you have identified, then you actually maybe put a fence, you put maybe what we call barriers. Not only that, but you might even hire a security guard to be able to protect your house. And this is exactly what is going to happen with that vaccine. The vaccine is going to produce what we call soldier cells, so that when the virus is going to come inside your body, it is going to destroy the virus, you see? And that is basically what we call the theory there of developing immunity. It is your body that develops what we call soldier cells so that it is going to fight against the virus. Now, unfortunately, there are so many theories that go and say, well, you know, when you are going to have this vaccine, there are some elements there, for instance, that are what we call maybe from fetal fetus, which is not true. They say it has pork in it. It is not also true, you see. So many of these, if you look into the vaccine, the component of the vaccine, there are no what we call components like that. There are no what we call fetal tissues. There are no pork inside it. There are no eggs. It is not even a live virus, except for the other ones, wherein the virus is actually there. But this mRNA, you see, are the ones that what happens is that the body is going to be inserted a recipe, okay? The mRNA is going to be inserted and the body is going to make a recipe to fight against the virus, you see? So it is not really a virus that is being injected, see? So looking at all of this, really, that is true that there are some side effects. We still don't know whether it can actually kill people because in the internet it says that some people have died, but it has not yet been what we call proven. But for instance, if there are two airlines and you have an airline that can take you from Zimbabwe to South Africa, that will give you what we call 95% what we call assurance that you are not going to have a crash. And you have another airline that is going to tell you, okay, if you ride this airplane, you have only a 10% chance of reaching South Africa. Which would you take? Obviously, you're going to take the one that is going to give you 95%. Unfortunately, in the world, there is no such thing as 100% protection. What we as doctors do, we actually look at the risk and say, okay, although this is a risk, yet your risk is actually lesser. Now, I tell you in this world, when we have decisions, it is not between absolute evil and absolute good. It is always between two lesser evils. And that's it. Only God actually gives us a decision to decide between absolute good and absolute evil. In this world, it is going to be really between two evils. For instance, if you are going to take a medication for high blood pressure, it is going to help you live longer, but there are going to be side effects, but yet you accept it because it is well known that you are going to live a longer life, a much better life with these medications, even though it has some side effects. Similarly with the virus, what we call vaccination, your chance of survival is much better if you actually use the vaccination, compared to if you are not going to get the vaccination. Now let us go into the statistics. Okay, for instance, the Pfizer vaccine, it is 95% effective. That means if you have about 100 people who are going to be vaccinated, 95% are going to be what we call protected. That means the possibility that 5% are going to be sick, okay? Whereas if you are not going to get that virus vaccination, the chances is that, well, you are openly exposed. You don't have what we call immunity. So most likely, if you have about 100 people who are exposed there, maybe about 80% are going to get the disease, you see? So which is much better? To get the vaccine and you have a 95% what we call protection, compared to maybe only about 10% or 20% if you are not going to be vaccinated. And this is it. We always have what we call a risk-benefit ratio. And you are much safer if you are going to get the vaccine, even though it has some side effects, even though it has actually adverse effects, like, for instance, pain in your muscle, or you might even have some allergy. But in the long run, we are much better. Your chances of survival are much better if we take the vaccine.
I like the matter-of-fact approach in your assessment, Doc, because I think, yeah, there is a lot of misinformation going about. I think maybe it may be a good time to share some of the sites that the church has made available, the information. I took a screenshot. People may not actually know there's a website that just, you know, a section of the Adventist Health Ministries website that is dealing with the coronavirus. A lot of resources there. As you can see on the screen, I'm encouraging you to have a look there. And maybe as I jump over back to you, Doc, in terms of a position statement on immunization, what is the church's position on immunization? Is there something that we can share?
Yes. If you could actually come up with that slide which directs us, that's one. If this is the statement from the General Conference on what we call the vaccine, it encourages, it actually tells us, you see, about the vaccine, but at the same time, it also tells us that it is encouraged. There is no what we call a theological statement. Okay, first of all, we have to realize that it is also our responsibility to keep and to follow government regulations, but at the same time, also to keep ourselves healthy. You know, when you keep yourself healthy, you're able to travel. We know that these days, even some airlines now are saying that unless you have what we call the vaccination certificate, then you cannot travel anymore, you see? So now how are you going to spread the gospel if you are not actually going to be able to travel? But at the same time, the General Conference, as it makes the statements, okay, it also says it is our individual choice, because we cannot force people. It is not what we call going to be this fellowship or what we call get out of the church if you're not going to be vaccinated, but we encourage what we call members of the church to get the vaccination so that they can actually be protected from the virus and at the same time to be able to be more effective when we are actually healthy. But it is an individual choice. So if the individual is not going to accept it, then let us just accept also their decision, because God has given us the freedom of choice. But in that article that I have actually shown, it is encouraging members to actually get the vaccination. And then the other slide, the next slide there, if you want to have a full what we call understanding about the vaccine that is available, last January 27, Loma Linda came up with a webinar, and this is a very valuable resource material. In fact, I would suggest that you show this because it's pre-recorded. You show this to your church so that they can be what we call educated and they can make what we call an intelligent decision.
Thank you, Doc. Yes, I saw you. I was on that call, that webinar during the week. Very great resource, and I would really encourage people to have a look at it. I'll put it up again. Some very candid insights and a lot of information that even I, as a layperson in medicine,
Just correction is www. Sorry, there's something. It's www.ghi. See, it's GSI, it's Global Health Institute. That's except for a dot after the W.
Okay, www.ghi.llu. That's llu.edu and everything else I think is correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So please make sure. We'll also post some of these links in the comments after the call, after this stream, and trust that people will get more insights. Thank you so much for that, Doc. I wanted to jump over to Sister Ruthie. I mean, a lot of things have changed. If we were having this call maybe last year, I have an idea what you would have told us are the policies we're supposed to have as churches. What do you feel are the basic insurance policies that every church should have at the moment? Are you able to discuss that?
Yes. Generally, every church should have the general liability policy, which covers automatically all members. Everyone, the moment you enter into the gates, the premises of the church, and anything, a mishap happens, we've got slips and falls, with anything that might happen, you are automatically covered. So general liability, it's basically for all members within our premises. Then the other policy that each church should have is the denominational property, because it is good to be good stewards. Members have built the churches and furnished them, and the premiums are not high, so it's good for each church to be covered in case of the cyclones that are happening, the storms, the different natural disasters that we are seeing these days. The church will be lightning. A lot of churches have burned, and after lightning, ARIM will pay and the churches will be rebuilt. The other policy is that I've noticed that churches need pathfinders. Our pathfinders, because of the activities, they should be covered, and miscellaneous activities policy that will cover armor groups, women's ministries, singing groups, and all the other activities that might be happening, camp outs, also that, and volunteer labor, whereby people will come to church on a Sunday and volunteer to do some work that needs to be done. They must also be covered. But whilst we are there, for these policies to be in place, each church should have a safety officer. I think you mentioned it earlier on when we started. Each church should have a safety officer. It's a very critical role because it helps in the well-being of the local church. If this role could be compared to any occupation in biblical times, it would be the job of a shepherd. Shepherds have a personal interest in the well-being of that which they look after. While shepherds provide many other services, one of their primary role is a protector of their flock. So from the medical incidents, the slips and falls that I was talking about that can happen at the church grounds, to severe weather, and the current COVID-19 situation, and the things that we are not supposed to be doing that might happen, and the contact tracing is done, and it ends up being from our church, which can be a problem. If we have a safety officer, that safety officer can provide leadership that is mission driven, that is also practical, safety measures that will help decrease the loss across our territory. So a safety officer who is more familiar with the challenges faced at a local church level is better equipped to advise us with certain strategies that pertain to us, because the website for ARM, it's across the board, and the resources that we are provided by Adventist Risk Management might not be very effective, or we might not use them in our territory. I'll give an example whereby here we've got a lot of drownings, yet in the first world they don't understand why someone would want to cross a river without going through the bridge. So we've got those different environments whereby we've got a lot of accidents in our dirty roads, yet the first worlds, their roads are paved properly, no potholes and things like that. So if we've got safety officers, they will let us know our challenges, and it will help us come out with resources that pertain to our environment. So we really need the safety officers for them to be able to know these policies that I have mentioned, and for them to implement them and to request the policies, because if they don't know the policies, they will not be used. We will be disadvantaging ourselves, because we lose out from what we don't know that the church at large has provided for us, but we don't request because we don't know that it actually exists. And at the end of the day, our members are disadvantaged.
Yes, and maybe to appreciate the clarity with which you've shared that, someone may be sitting at home and thinking, okay, Sister Ruth is in Pretoria, I'm here. How do I get this? How do I get access to this? Please visit your local conference. At the South Zimbabwe Conference, see Mrs. Franch. At the West Zimbabwe Conference, please go to the Treasury Department. I know it used to be Sister Gladys Nyoni. I'm not sure if it's still her. At the Union, Sister Barbara Moyo is waiting to assist you, and she's in constant touch with Sister Ruthie. So the system works. The system works. Come, we want to hear your challenges. We want to solve your problems. We want to assist to reduce the risk that the risks that are inherent in our ministries, in the various ministries. Maybe I notice our time has flown. Maybe just a quick exit question for Sister Jennifer. We're looking at life after the pandemic. What's your vision of a low-risk church after all this? What are we learning? What have we learned? What's your vision as we close up?
So one thing I see from this pandemic is the opportunity to start using best practices, especially as it comes to how we live stream. I don't think that even once we're allowed to go back into physical churches, that we're going to stop live streaming our services. And so I think if we can start instituting best practices now, as far as protecting people's privacy, as Ruthie had mentioned, having zones in church where people can know that they're not going to be exposed, respecting copyright, and respecting trademark moving forward, then this will be a lower risk environment for our church moving forward. Okay,
that's helpful to begin to see this as our new normal. You know, we're not going back on this, and I totally agree with you. You know, our time is up. I almost feel like saying let's meet next week to continue the same discussion. But I think the main thing here is we've kind of thrown out ideas, kind of shone a light in some dark areas, and I think some of the resources that we've shared are there for people. This is a fluid environment. We're getting new strains of the COVID of COVID. So this is a continuing conversation, which we hope will continue to have. Just to appreciate all our guests today. Thank you so much for making the time. And we just let everybody who's on this call to know that please join us. Next month, we have another topic, slightly different from this. I'll just show you on the screen. We'll be talking about generational wealth transfer. It's a conversation on the management of personal assets during a Christian's lifetime and beyond a generation. We'll be largely speaking from the context of our planned giving and trust services department, but we've got some great guests there as well. Hannah Becker, Promise Mube, one of our senior lawyers, and Pastor Howard Rassar. That should be a conversation you don't want to miss. And with that, it's been an hour with Trish. Thank you so much. God bless you all, and strength to you during these hard times. But remember, we have a great hope. God bless you. Bye-bye.